Becky for introducing me. As she said, my name is Alex Christopher. This is my third season at Big Cypress National Preserve. I'm a seasonal ranger with the National Park Service, so I travel around the country pretty much, but I always keep coming back down to Big Cypress in the winter, which is not a bad place to spend the winter. Today, I'll be talking about the unseen reptiles of Big Cypress, but before I get into that, I want to talk about a little bit who I work for and why we're here. So I work for the National Park Service. And as some of you may know, the National Park Service is the agency that protects the natural, historical, and cultural resources of America. Currently, there are 423 national park units. We just added 3 more this year. And notice how I said national park unit. Not every national park unit is called a park. We have national battlefields, national lake shores, national monuments, national seashores, just to name a few. So of the 423 national park units, only 59 of them are actually designated national park. The largest national park is Wrangell St. Elias in Alaska at 11 million acres. And then the smallest one is the Thaddeus Casino in Philadelphia, which is only 700 square feet. So we operate a wide variety of resources, of awesome places to visit, and there's just so many cool places to see. But here in South Florida at Big Cypress National Preserve, we are a national preserve. So let's talk about what makes us a national preserve and not a national park. So map of Big Cypress. We're probably about 40 minutes east of Naples Preserve. So if you just take a quick trip down Highway 41, you'll be in Big Cypress. So this is Big Cypress. Big area, 729,000 acres. About the size of Rhode Island. I talk to 6th graders every day, and the way I relate it to them is that it's the size of 550,000 football fields. So it's a real big area. But right now we actually are open. Our hiking, biking, and paddling trails are all open. So come out and give us a visit if you haven't been before. It's an awesome place. And we have an ease of access with I-75 to the north of us and 41 to the south. Lots of great visitor centers, places like that. So how did Big Cypress get here? Why is this big chunk of land protected? So we almost lost Big Cypress. In one point in time in the 1960s, there was proposed to be a jet port that was to be built right in the middle of Big Cypress. Now this jet port was going to be about 10 times the size of the Miami airport. It would have been the world's largest jet port at the time. And there would have actually been a tramway that was going to connect the two coasts to bring people to that jet port. Now, the people that used Big Cypress, they knew that this was a terrible idea and that this would destroy the environment. These people would have been hunters, conservationists, people that had swamp buggies and private homes out here, people that had used Big Cypress for their airboats, the Seminole Miccosukee tribes, and all these groups, they came together and petitioned to Congress for us to become a national park. Now, had we become a national park, the people that had used Big Cypress for what they had traditionally used Big Cypress for would no longer be able to use it for those reasons. So there would be no more hunting, no more airboat rides, no more swamp buggies, and people that lived out here would have had to have given up their land. So instead, in 1974, we became the very first national preserve. And as a national preserve, we are managed a bit differently from a national park. We still allow all those activities to take place out here. The hunting, the airboat rides, the swamp buggies, private land ownership, cattle leases, and even oil and gas exploration. That still can go on out here at Big Cypress National Preserve. But we stop that further development from taking place and therefore save this habitat and save that water that's so important out here in Big Cypress and important to all of us. So I love Big Cypress. It's a great place. And I'm out here every day, so I'm not scared of Big Cypress at all. But I think some people, when they think of a swamp, this is kind of what they think of. They see, they think of alligators climbing up trees and invasive Burmese pythons around every corner and rattlesnakes that want to kill you, that are lurking in the swamp just waiting for their next person to capture. But I know that that is not the case. And yes, we do have these reptiles here, but you're not likely to see these dangerous snakes. And as long as you give them distance, you really have nothing to worry about. But the rest of the world may not see that. And I wanted to observe, and then I wanted to find out why people are so scared of reptiles and why they have this feeling that, that all these reptiles are out there trying to kill them. And in my research, I found out about herpetophobia, which is the fear whenever you are in proximity to a reptile. This can play out as the inability to shop in pet stores, the refusal to go on hikes or trips where there's a chance of encountering a reptile like a snake or an alligator, and overreacting to the sight of a reptile if it's harmless or not. And this could include screaming, crying, shaking, hyperventilating, or just overreacting in general. And roughly 9% of the population has this herpetophobia.
I really like
I'm sure you know some people that have it too as well. So I wanted to figure out why people have this. And what I found out is that there's a couple reasons. So one of the main reasons I found out is that it could be evolutionary. There's actually been researchers that have proposed that humans have developed an inborn affinity to sense snakes. Psychologists have tested this belief and found out that both adults and children were better at noticing images of snakes or alligators than they were of various non-threatening things such as puppies or ice cream. So the test subjects were more easily able to identify and locate those threatening images such as the snakes. And this is they hypothesized that this is an ability that our ancestors had to detect snakes. And that was an advantage that we gained through natural selection, that the humans that were more able to identify those scary creatures were therefore more able to survive. Now, back then, the reptiles looked a lot different than they do now. And some of them were pretty scary, like this ancestor of the monitor lizard that was up to 10 feet in length.
I hate the monitor lizard.
Yeah. Well, this one is not around today, thankfully, but it's the common ancestor for them. So this inborn ability helps us better identify and gives us, and it gave us a better survival rate back then. So that's one of the reasons I found out. Another reason is what's called learned behavior. So an intense fear of snakes could simply just be learned over time. The most obvious case is if you were a young kid and maybe your brother put a frog in your pocket, or if you were, and there was someone put a snake on your back or something like that. As a child, that fear sticks with you. So that fear that you have from encountering that animal never goes away. And you just kind of stick with us. And then another obvious source of learned behavior is that if your parents have a fear of snakes, that can be projected onto you as well. So you can easily learn that from your parents as well. And then a final reason in my research that I found that people have this sometimes irrational fear of snakes and reptiles is through myths and folklore. So there's a number of myths and folklore out there that just aren't true. For example, I found out about a myth called the hoop snake, which you can see there on the top right. That's an artist's illustration. What it is that some people think that there is actually a snake that it will, if it sees you, it will bite its tail and then form into a hoop like a wheel and chase after you. And then it will actually, when it gets to you, form into a javelin and project itself at you and inject you with venom through its tail. Now, people that are around snakes know that that is not true at all and that this myth is completely false. There is no snake in the world that does that, and there is no snake in the world that injects venom through its tail. So that's an old Appalachian myth that somehow still exists to today. Another myth that I heard about was the whipping snake. So right there in the bottom left, that's a coach whip snake. And there's a myth going around that, there was farmers that would be working in the fields. They'd encounter this coach whip snake, and then it would come up to them and it would constrict them and then whip them to death. Now, obviously, this is exaggerated, but again, these myths get perpetuated over time. Another one that I found out about was the milking snake. It's about a snake that would get into people's barns, into farmers' barns, and they would actually go to the cows and milk them. Now, the reason I think this myth got started was that snakes actually are known to congregate in barns because what else lives in barns? Rats, one of their main source of foods. So I think that's how this myth started. There has never been a recorded instance of a snake actually drinking the milk from a cow. So I think that's probably how that one started. And then there's other myths about other reptiles. For example, that eating turtles will cure all your health ails. And these just simply aren't true. So I think the perpetuation of these myths and folklore help carry the hype that people have for the hype for being scared of these reptiles. So, fact of the matter, are these reptiles actually harmful to humans? Well, not really. Could you be bitten by a venomous snake? Yes. The odds are extremely low. Chances of being bit by a venomous snake are 1 in 37,500, which is honestly really low. And especially when you think about it, most bites from a snake occur on the hand on males ages 18 to 25. So if they occur on the hand, what are they trying to do? They're trying to pick it up. Probably some drinking going on there, trying to pick up a venomous snake with your hand. And that's how the majority of venomous snake bites occur. And then even in the US, the chances of, if you were bit by a venomous snake, the chances of dying in the US are virtually zero. With modern medicine, you will most likely make a full recovery. And then I wanted to look up alligator stats too. The chances of being attacked by an unprovoked alligator are 1 in 2.4 million. So your odds of an alligator just coming up and attacking you are pretty much zero. And in Florida, there are 0 venomous lizards. So the fear for these reptiles just doesn't seem to be have much weight to it. It doesn't hold much weight. So I just want people to know that these reptiles out here aren't as dangerous as people make them out to be. And that actually, there's a lot of them that should be appreciated. However, though, just because they are here, I want to talk about our 4 venomous snakes. Just if you want to identify them. So these are the 4 venomous snakes of Big Cypress. The eastern diamondback rattlesnake on the top left there. The dusky pygmy rattlesnake on the top right. The cottonmouth on the bottom right, or the water moccasin. And then the coral snake on the bottom left. So the diamondback rattlesnake, they're pretty easy to identify. They always have that diamond-like pattern on their back, and they are in the pit viper family. So they have a really thick head followed by a very noticeable neck. And the pygmy rattlesnake and the the cottonmouth are also in that pit viper family. So they have that triangle, thick shaped head with that very noticeable neck. And they are all really thick bodied. So that's how you can identify those pit vipers. Now the coral snake is actually in the cobra family. It's actually in the family Elapidae, which includes cobras. And they have that really, I think it's beautiful pattern. But there are obviously some snakes that try to mimic that pattern. But just remember the red on yellow rhyme. So red on yellow, red on yellow and you're a dead fellow. And then red on black, friend of Jack. So that's how you can identify those venomous snakes. But again, these are rare encounters.
That would so confuse.
So there's over 34 non-venomous snakes in Big Cypress, and only 4 of them are venomous. So I want to highlight those reptiles that aren't dangerous, those reptiles that are really cool, and they're interesting, and they're harmless, and they're all really beautiful. So I think these animals deserve a little more, and these are those unseen reptiles of Big Cypress. So let's get into it. So why should I care about reptiles anyway? They're slimy, and they don't do anything for me. Why should I care? Well, that's just not true. Reptiles do have a place. They serve an important role in the food chain, being that they're the branch between the aquatic food web and the terrestrial land-based food web. So snakes reptiles tend to live in that buffer zone between water and land. So they eat aquatic pests, and they also eat land pests, and then they go on.
A reptile eating a...
Where'd you get that picture?
Excuse me, can you please mute your mic, and then we'll have questions at the end. Sorry. So Anyway, these reptiles also eat many pests and species such as rodents and crop-eating bugs. So reptiles have a very important place in the food web. So they eat things that are smaller than them. They eat things that are pests, but they also are a dependable food source for many large animals like this great blue heron. So let's take a closer look and look beyond the obvious and discover some of these interesting, forgotten, unseen reptiles. And maybe you see that one right there in that tree. That's actually a copperhead, which doesn't live in Florida, but I just thought it was a cool slide there. So let's first talk about some of our snake species that live here in Big Cypress. So as I said, there's over 28 species in Big Cypress of snakes that are non-venomous. And there's actually over 40 species in Florida of non-venomous snakes. So the vast majority of our species of snakes here are non-venomous. So let's find out a couple of them and see what they look like and what they're doing and why they're, and some of the ones that I think are just absolutely cool and beautiful. So this one right here is one of my favorites. It's the Everglades rat snake, and that's that red rat snake there along that in that picture there. Next it is the yellow rat snake. It's close cousin. Some people consider Everglades rat snakes a subspecies of the yellow rat snake. Some say they're so alike they're not even a subspecies. But that red coloration only occurs down here in South Florida in the Big Cypress and Everglades region, that true coloration there. And there's not many of these Everglades rat snakes left because a lot of their habitat has been destroyed for them. And also they interbreed with the yellow rat. So it's really hard to find a true dark red Everglades rat snake. But these rat snakes, they're excellent swimmers and climbers. I see them in the swamp often. I also see them climbing on trees. For example, that picture at the beginning, that was a rat snake up in an airplane. And I actually was with the photographer when he took that photo. He was hanging out on an airplane in a cypress tree. So they're excellent climbers. They can slither right up and down a tree. Really cool snakes, beautiful snakes. And again, their habitat is being destroyed. And also oftentimes pet traders will pick these Everglades rat snakes up because they're so beautiful and sell them. We have the Brooks king snake, which is the snake in that larger picture. And next to it is the Florida king snake, which is its subspecies. Now, the Brooks king snake is a subspecies of the Florida king snake. And it's called the king snake because it is the king of all snakes. It actually eats venomous snakes. And that color morph that you see on that Brooks king snake, the lighter colored one, that only occurs in South Florida. And the reason for that is that they believe that the Miami rimrock and this in the Southern Everglades and is this historic domain of that snake. And that rimrock, it's blending in with its surroundings better. So by having that lighter coloration, it's able to blend in with that limestone background better. As other areas of Florida, the king snake population here has been greatly reduced. Habitat destruction is been discussed as the main cause, but the exact cause for the decline in population of these king snakes is pretty much unknown. Then we have the southern black racer. Now, the black racers here in South Florida are a little bit lighter than the ones you'd see up north. They're more of a gray color as opposed to that black color. They're pretty common though in grasslands, open woodlands, suburban areas. Wherever their prey is plentiful, that's where you're gonna find these racer snakes. Oftentimes you'll see them hanging out on roads, and the way that they defend themselves is they won't bite you, they just wanna get away. They're actually the fastest species of snake in North America. They can move up to 8 miles an hour, which is pretty fast for a snake. They're agile hunters, so they go after frogs, rodents, lizards, fish, insects, and even other snakes. So they're kind of just trying to eat anything they can. They're carnivores though, so they have to eat other types of meat. So it's not a constrictor. The way it just eats its prey is that it'll just overpower its prey with its speed and swallow it whole. It's also been called the farmer's friend because it eats a lot of those pests like locusts and rats and things like that. So the next species that we have is the eastern hognose snake. Now, this snake is pretty rare in the Everglades region in Big Cypress. It prefers those sandy soil habitats like pine flatwoods. Naples Preserve would probably be a great area to try to find a hognose snake. Now, hognose snakes, they have this really enlarged teeth in their rear and upper jaw. Some people say they kind of look like a cobra, although they're not venomous, so don't worry. And the reason they have that jaw is they have these really weird shaped teeth, and that's because their favorite prey is toads. And they actually will pop inflated toads with their teeth. So the toads will inflate themselves when they try to eat them. And the hognose snakes, they have teeth that are able to pop those toads like balloons. They're specially shaped to do that. So that's their main source of food is toads, but they will also eat frogs, insects, and invertebrates. And the hognose snake is renowned for its death feigning behavior. So when it's threatened, this is actually what it will do. It'll play dead. So that snake's not dead, but when that hognose snake feels that it's being threatened, it'll play dead like that. It will turn over backwards and stick its tongue out. And then once the threat is passed, it will slowly roll over, make sure the coast is clear, and keep moving on. Another awesome snake we have here, really beautiful snake that we have in Big Cypress region in Florida is the indigo snake. And the indigo snake is a threatened species. Not many of them left. There hasn't been one seen in Big Cypress in quite some time. And their preferred habitat is going to be those pine and scrubby flatwoods, pine rocklands, dry prairie, tropical hardwood hammocks, freshwater marshes. So they need a wide variety of habitats to survive, and they just don't get that mosaic of habitats anymore. So because of that, a lot of them have died, or sorry, their population has gone down. Eastern indigo snakes they're listed as threatened because of their dramatic population declines caused by not only the habitat loss, but also over collecting for pets. A lot of people keep these snakes. Indigo snakes are rather large. They're our largest species, a native species in North America. They can grow up to 8 feet long, so rather large. They have examples of, there's a live one that lives at Corkscrew Swamp that they have on display there. I know there's a couple other places that have them on display as well. I've never seen a wild one, but that's one that I'd love to see, but there's just not many of them around. This here is the scarlet king snake. The scarlet king snake is a lot smaller than most of those king snakes. They only grow up to about 40 to 50 inches, and they're really long and slender. And if you can see that color pattern, what they're trying to do is mimic that coral snake. So the snake on the right there in the smaller picture, that's the coral snake. And then the snake on the left, that's the king snake. And as you can see, as I said earlier, it has the red on black on the king snake, while the coral snake has the red on yellow. So if you remember the red on black, friend of Jack, red on yellow, kill a fellow, that's how you can know the difference. So you can see right there the pattern difference on the two types of snakes. So on the right, that's coral snake. On the left, scarlet king snake. This is one of my favorite snakes we have out here in Big Cypress. I mean, they're all my favorite, but this one's really cool. It's called the eastern mud snake, and they live in aquatic habitats. They like cypress swamps, drainage ditches, rivers, marshes, lakes, anywhere where there are waters that are choked with vegetation, because that's where its favorite prey lives. And it eats the amphiuma, which is this salamander-like creature. And this amphiumas, they're super slippery and they're slimy. So the eastern mud snake has these teeth that are specifically designed to grip that amphiuma, to eat these amphiumas. And the eastern mud snake they have really large egg clutches. When they lay their eggs, they have over 104 eggs in a clutch. For a snake that only grows to be about 4 to 5 feet, that's a lot of eggs. And eastern mud snakes, if you pick one up, they'll try to defend themselves by trying to kind of poke you with their tail. They can't break the skin and they're not venomous, but that led a lot of people to believe they were venomous. So they have been unfortunately persecuted for that. They're a non-venomous species, but because people thought their tails were actually injecting people with venom, they were persecuted for that. Alrighty, so that's a lot of our awesome snake species. Again, there's many more that are out here that are just awesome that we don't have time to talk about today. So let's get into lizards now. So let's talk about some of our unseen lizard species here in Big Cypress. Some really awesome, cool species out here. So if I show you this picture, I'm sure some of you probably think that that's a snake, but that is not a snake. That is a legless lizard. It's called a glass lizard. And what separates it from a snake is that glass lizards have movable eyelids, while snakes don't have eyelids at all. Also, glass lizards have ear openings, while snakes don't have ear openings. And they're called glass lizards because if they're threatened, if you pick one up, they'll actually break their tail off. So they say they shatter like glass, their tails. And also, unlike a snake, glass lizards can only go after smaller prey because they don't have flexible jaws like a snake does. A snake can open its jaws really wide and swallow larger prey, but a glass lizard, well, lizards in general, just can't do that. So by all means, it's a lizard except for the fact that it doesn't have legs. So this is a legless lizard called a glass lizard. It's not a snake. And they live out here in Big Cypress. You can find them in those sandier habitats. They live in a variety of habitats, so the sandy flatwoods, the pinelands. You can see them in wetlands, though, as well, so in cypress swamps around there as well. And they're also common in coastal dune habitats. So I know, for example, I've seen them at Barefoot Beach before. And then another awesome species of lizard we have here is a southeastern five-line skink. Their beautiful blue tail, when they're younger, they have this beautiful blue tail. And then as they get older, that tail actually turned red. And just like the glass lizard, it actually can shatter its tail. And it's often seen climbing on man-made structures such as boardwalks. So any man-made structures around natural areas are a good place to find these lizards. For example, I've seen these southeastern five-line skinks on our boardwalk Kirby Storter in Big Cypress. So that could be a good place to find some of those five-line skinks. So let's move on to some of our turtle species here in Big Cypress. So we have lots of awesome turtles out here as well. For example, the Florida softshell turtle, commonly seen all over Florida. The shell is leathery, so it has that softer shell. And it has like that white cream underside, which is called the plastron. So the top of the shell is called the carapace, and that's that brown shell, and on the bottom is called the plastron. So the bottom of the soft shell turtles is going to be like cream or white, and then brown on the carapace. Now, these soft shells, they prefer dwelling in slow-moving freshwater bodies that have sand or mud bottoms. However, they also can be seen in these brackish streams out here as well. So, for example, I've seen them on the Turner River and Halfway Creek in more of a saltwater environment out in the estuary, these soft shell turtles. And they have this really weird way of hunting for prey. They'll actually burrow into the sand except for their head, and then they'll wait for a fish to swim by or whatever, and then they'll ambush that. And so that's a really cool adaptation they have. Another surprising fact about these turtles is that they will actually use alligator nest to lay their eggs, and then that alligator will unknowingly protect those eggs for the turtle. So the alligator doesn't know that they're not alligator turtles or alligator eggs. And so those baby soft shell turtles will be protected from the alligator inadvertently. And they lay 10 to 30 eggs at a time. So that's one way that they've kind of made an advantage on other species of turtles, these soft shell turtles. This turtle right here is called the striped mud turtle, and it's the smallest species of turtle we have in Big Cypress. They only grow to be about 4 to 5 inches, so they're really tiny, but they can live as long as 50 years. Now, they're commonly referred to as the cow dung cooter because they're often seen feeding on manure. So they'll be found in cattle fields, and they will actually sift through the manure of the cattle and look for some to eat on. So they eat little bugs. They can eat plants as well. So again, that's the 3-striped mud turtle, also called the cow dung cooter. This here is the box turtle. This is the ornate box turtle. There's many different subspecies of box turtles patterns. This is the one that lives down here in South Florida. They can live up to 100 years old in the wild. And they start out when they're first born as carnivorous, and then they gradually become omnivorous as they get older. So as they get older, they'll start to eat plants and animals as well. Now, a female may lay fertile eggs for up to 4 years after one successful mating, so they can hold those fertile eggs in them for up to 4 years. And the nesting will occur from May through July. They eat a wide variety of animals, so they may affect prey populations on other animals by the amount they eat. Also, they disperse seeds by eating seeds from other plants and berries, so they can disperse the seeds of the plants. Now, this is a weird adaptation they have. This is the plastron of the box turtle. So if you look at the one on the left, it doesn't have that hump. That's the female box turtle shell. And then the one on the right, that's the male box turtle shell. It has that hump there. And that's for mating. So they're better able to attach themselves on top of a female box turtle with that hump there. So that's an adaptation they have for mating. This turtle right here, this is the diamondback terrapin. And the diamondback terrapins are pretty cool because they live in brackish water. So they prefer that saltwater, freshwater, mixed water. So they're going to be found in the estuary. Now, in the 1900s, they were severely overcollected for soup, almost to the point of extinction. They were considered a delicacy to eat them. So there was a high demand for them. Now, they prefer that saltwater environment because they actually have special glands that secrete saltwater. And their favorite thing to eat is mollusks. So whelks, snails, things like that. That's kind of what they eat, and they can crush up their shells because they have really powerful jaws. And the females actually lay eggs in cavities above the high tide mark, kind of like a sea turtle. Now, diamondback terrapins, unfortunately, a lot of them have been found in crab traps. They will go after the bait in the crab traps, and then they'll die in those crab traps. So we've started to encourage people to buy these types of crab traps that have a actually terrapin release on them. So that orange square there allows the terrapin to get out, but does not allow crabs to get out of the trap. So that terrapin is able to get out from that orange square. So there's, if you do buy crab traps, I do encourage you to buy one with the turtle release square on it. Now, this is one of my favorite species we have out here, and if you've been to Naples Preserve, I'm sure you've probably seen these guys before, and that's the gopher tortoise. So the gopher tortoise has an average lifespan in the wild of 40 to 70 years. It's called the gopher tortoise because what it does is it will burrow in the ground and digs deep burrows. Now, the gopher tortoise is a keystone species because those burrows provide habitat for hundreds of different animals, ranging from frogs to owls, and even that endangered indigo snake I talked about. They prefer that longleaf pine forest and also coastal dune habitat. Those provide the optimal conditions for the turtles. So that's why that Naples Preserve has such a high amount of those gopher tortoises there. So it needs habitat with trees, but not too many, because then if there's too many, the sun is not able to get through to the forest floor. And then there are plants that they like to eat on the forest floor, such as berries and flowers and grass and mushrooms, and as well as cactus pads as well. They will not be able to grow if the sun's not able to get to the forest floor. So they need a good amount of tall trees, but not too many that it overshadows the plants they like to eat. And these guys are vulnerable to extinction because, unfortunately, they don't have a lot of habitat left. They believe, what I saw number-wise, is that there's up to 700,000 left in the wild. And the main threat is that habitat loss and the urbanization that continues to fragment their habitat. So not much place for them, not many longleaf forests for them to live in coastal dune habitat. And also a lot of them do get hit by cars. And also these gopher tortoise, it takes a long time for them to reach sexual maturity. It can take up to 20 years for females to actually start producing new offspring. And there's a low survival rate of the eggs. Now, gopher tortoise, have you ever seen them? They're mostly docile. They don't you know, they move pretty slowly, but during breeding season, the males will get aggressive and they actually will bump into each other with their shells. And it's almost like they're playing bumper cars. It's kind of funny to see. I've seen a couple of videos of it. And those gopher tortoises bumping each other with their shells. So that's an overview of some of our awesome reptiles we have out here in Big Cypress, those unseen ones that most people don't think about when they think about South Florida and they think about those reptiles. They think about all those scary creatures. But unfortunately, these reptiles have a lot of threats that I've kind of already touched on. So I touched on habitat loss. And if you've noticed habitat loss, if you've noticed when I mentioned the habitat these animals like to live in, a lot of that habitat is also where we humans like to build. So those coastal dunes, the pine flatwoods, all areas that are being developed. And there's just not a lot of habitat for them left here in South Florida. Luckily, Big Cypress is one of those places where they can have a lot of habitat to survive in. Another threat that they face is invasive species. Non-native invasive species are, what they do is they are competitors to the native species. So like this Burmese python, it's eating all the prey that a lot of our native snakes eat. And also they're preying on the reptiles as well. So all in all, these invasive species are a big impact on our reptiles. They have a big impact on the whole ecosystem, but it affects our reptiles as well. So as you may know, here in Big Cypress, we are trying to handle our population of Burmese pythons. This is an example of a 16-footer that me and my volunteers caught in Big Cypress. This was one that was just hanging out on the road. And actually, this snake is being used by our wildlife biologists as a Judas snake, they call it, or a scout snake now is what they call it. So they put a tracker in that snake, radio tracker, and they're able to track that snake. And a big female like this, they believe is going to, that more snakes will be attracted to this big female, breeding female. So there'll be a lot of males that'll come and try to come after this female snake. So that's one of the programs we have out here to get rid of these invasive species. So another threat that not many people think of to our reptiles is the pet trade. I read that 75% of all species of reptiles, or sorry, 90% of all species of reptiles are being have been picked up in the wild for sale in the pet trade. There's very few regulations for the pet trade, so if you pick up a wild snake, you pretty much can go and sell it. And then of the species that are for sale of all snakes, 50% of them were wild. So 50% of all species of snakes were wild and are now for sale. So that's also a big hit to a lot of our native reptile populations. For example, that Everglades rat snake, the Brooks king snake, all those really rare ones that only live down here are common for the pet trade to try to, well, pick them up and also to reproduce them for sale in the pet trade. Disease is another concern. A lot of our turtles suffer from what's called upper respiratory tract disease, which is caused by a bacterium. It has been seen in our gopher tortoise here. And some of these symptoms of the disease are runny, wet nose. Disease is spread by direct contact. And the infective animal, when it sneezes on an infected animal, it causes upper respiratory tract disease, which can eventually kill that animal. Another disease that is affecting our native snake population is called snake fungal disease, which is a disease that has been documented in at least 37 snake species in South Florida. And the affected snakes will have a fungal dermatitis present. So basically their skin will almost look like it's rotting away. And the snake can eventually die from that. And what causes that is not yet really known. So to conclude, I just want to talk about how can we change people's minds? How can we get people to enjoy these snakes, to be desensitized to them and appreciate them. Even if they're scared of them, just appreciate them for what they are. So one way you can do that is to try to slowly desensitize those herpophobes. So you can try to slowly, take them to the zoo and maybe have them look at a snake from afar, and then bring them out to Big Cypress and have them walk on a boardwalk and look at these animals from afar and realize that they're not dangerous at all. And then shut down those myths when you hear them, such as the hoop snake or the whipping snake. And obviously a lot of people think that the only good snake is a dead snake, but I just know that that's not the case, and tell them that these snakes and these reptiles have a very important place in the ecosystem. They serve an ecological niche that no other species fits. And also educate yourself and the public about these snakes. Know how to identify a non-venomous from a venomous snake. And then if you're like me and you like to observe these reptiles, how can you responsibly view these reptiles? So Big Cypress is a great place to come out to see these animals. And just some things that I've seen people do that if you do come out here to view these, I would really appreciate if you didn't do. For example, I've seen people throw rocks at alligators, and I think the reason they do this is because alligators, when they're out here basking, they're not moving. Alligators don't waste their energy. They don't like to, move when they don't have to. If they're out in the sun, they just want to be out in the sun. They're thermoregulating. It's a important ecological process. And I think people will throw those rocks to see if they're, to try to make them move. Or also people will feed them marshmallows, things like that. Don't feed any wild animals out here, and don't harass these wildlife. And also keep a comfortable distance. So I say anywhere from 15 yards is a good distance. And then these are some of the animals that I've seen out here in Big Cypress. These are pictures I've taken myself. So some water snakes I've seen, gopher tortoise, and an alligator. So, and again, when I was doing this, I was a comfortable distance away, and I was able to identify these species and appreciate them from a distance. So that's all I ask of. Big Cypress is an awesome place to see them. If you drive the dirt roads here at night, you're more likely to see them out in the roads at night after it's been warm all day, but you can see them at any time. For example, just yesterday I saw 3 brown water snakes all lying on top of each other. So Big Cypress is a great place to come out and view these reptiles. Just please view them responsibly. So that's the end of the program. I just wanted to leave with this awesome picture of a green anole, and I hope you've come to appreciate these animals like I have, and will enjoy them like I do as well. So I'll stop there, and if anyone has questions, I see I might have some in the chat. I'll look at these. So let's see if we have any good messages here. Also, if anyone wants to unmute themselves and ask a question, go for it. All right, is there, can a hog-nosed snake deal with cane toads? So that's a good question. So the cane toads do emit a bofotoxin, which can affect a lot of species of animals and can hurt a lot of species such as dogs. I don't know if the hognose will eat the cane toad. The cane toad is an invasive species, so it's not originally from here. So I don't know if the hognose have the ability to consume them without being affected by that bofotoxin. Is there any hope for a way of rendering female pythons infertile? That's right now, we don't know a lot about these Burmese pythons that are out here, and still much to be found out about them. Now, right now, we're just trying to find a way that we can attract the pythons to a single area, because the thing about them is that they're so plentiful out here, but they camouflage so well. So it's really hard for, you could be standing right, if you're out in the swamp, you could be standing right next to a 16-foot snake and you would never even know it. The vast majority of those snakes are picked up off the roads at night or during the day, like that one that I showed the picture of. And so we're still trying to find out a lot. We have a lot of researchers out here doing work, capturing pythons and trying to find ways to attract these pythons. So is there any hope to make them infertile? I don't know. But that's something in the future that maybe we'll find out. Is there any hope to stop these those pet trade selling bonanzas? So a lot of those are unregulated, and unfortunately, there's not too many laws stopping the sale. Now, there are some laws, state laws in Florida, for example, you can no longer bring in a Burmese python. But as far as picking up wild animals and selling them, there's still not really any regulation on that. And especially internationally, there's very little regulation regarding the sale of these animals. So let's see any other ones. All right, does anyone have any questions that they'd like to say in person? So you can unmute yourself. Oh, one more just came up. Why no regulation? You know, that's a good point. I wish I had the answer for that. And I really don't. So, you know, that's something that you can find out about. So I just don't know the answer to that one though. Any other questions? All right. So I'll stop sharing this.
All right. Thanks, Alex.
Absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate it. Always a pleasure to talk to you folks.
So it's glad everybody could come today. And these are recorded, and we'll have the link up, and it might take a day or so, but tell your friends about these, or, if you're looking for something to watch at night, you can watch Alex again or some of our past ones. So it's every Tuesday at 10 o'clock. Thanks, everybody.